Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. Well, when the Arab Spring erupted just a little over a year ago, even seasoned world watchers were taken by surprise. Now, my guest today, Bernard Guetta, a prize-winning French journalist and radio commentator, is no exception. He too was taken by surprise by the Arab Spring, but not because the fact it happened, but rather by the timing. Now, Guetta made his journalistic name as a reporter covering for Le Monde newspaper the rise of the Solidarity movement in Poland and later the fall of Mikhail Gorbachev's Soviet Union. So he knows that the striving for democracy and freedom is universal. And the question he basically puts to his readers in a new book is, why should the Arab world be any different? Now, this book weaves together basically Guetta's commentaries, his columns, over the past year covering the Arab Spring. And it came out just recently here in France. For the moment, it's only in French. We don't know if it's going to come out in English, but we're going to talk about it anyway today.
Okay.
For our viewers.
Thank you.
From reading your book, it's really fascinating. You were covering the Arab Spring month by month in real time. One of the ideas that emerges from it is your rejection of this idea that there is ever a clash of civilizations. You say there is no incompatibility between Islam and democracy. I find that very interesting.
No, there is no any, and why should it be, by the way? Muslim people are men like the other ones, and whenever you read the Bible, or the Quran, or the Torah, by the way, you could read it in many different ways. If you are bin Laden, you read in the Quran that you have to kill the Christians, the Jews, and all the non-Muslims. If you are a good man, a good Muslim man, you can read the Quran and to obey to very nice prescription, like to give charity to the poor people, like to support your wife and your children, and so on and so on.
What you're saying is you could give the same types of diverse readings to the Quran as you could give to the Bible?
Exactly.
Or any other religious text. There's no reason the Quran is more radical than any other religious book.
But when you read the Old Testament, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. It's about war and so on, and destruction and everything. But nevertheless, you have also you shall not kill. You shall not kill.
You shall not kill, one of the cardinal, kill. Right.
Exactly. The very basis of any civilization. So for me, it's it's a big stupidity.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
No. It's just to extend on what you're saying here. Your basic idea is that the Arab Spring, you were taken by surprise by the timing of it, but
absolutely,
it did not come out of nowhere. This had been building for a while, and you suggest you go back to Iran and to Turkey 10 years ago. A little more.
Take the Iranian example. 20 years, less than 20 years after the so-called Iranian Revolution against the Shah, the people, almost 80% of the people, rush to the polling station, to the polling station in English?
To the polling station,
to support Mr. Khatami. And why?
Who was a reformer at the time.
Because he was a reformer. He told the Iranian people that he wanted to build in Iran a state of law, a state of law. And so the people rushed to the polling station to support him. Why? Because the Iranian people, after 20 years, 2 decades, under the theocracy, under the power of the mullahs, wanted the state of law.
It was always there.
Yes, of course it was. Of course it was. Because the aspiration to freedom is universal. Ask any man, any woman, any child, what do you prefer, freedom or democracy?
So
the answer will be obvious.
Why is there then, let me call it conventional wisdom, why is there this perception among so many people that somehow the Arab world was different? A lot of people were saying this in the beginning. They weren't made for the Western-style democracy.
But you know, I heard the same thing about the Russian people. You know, during the Soviet times, well, this is normal. They don't know what freedom is about. They don't have any aspiration to freedom, and so on and so on. And now and 20 years after, we heard the same thing about the Arabs. But why?
So it's repeat. And at the time, right, that you had the same feelings about the fall of the Soviet Union as you do right now about what we're seeing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. During the Perestroika time, it was obvious for me that obviously the Russian people wanted democracy and wanted freedom. And the people in the Arabic world want also freedom, but it was very difficult for them.
Because they were kept under these
Under
very brutal
dictatorship everywhere, everywhere, in Saudi Arabia, in Algeria, and so on and so on. And those dictatorships destroy all the political forces during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s.
The civil society.
The civil
well.
society, the political parties, the political ideas, the political culture. And so it was very difficult for them, exactly as it was difficult for the Soviet people, for the Russian people, to rebuild a political scene, to know how to build, to regain freedom.
You make a very interesting point in your book. There's actually, you have a little chart, a map in the back, showing in all of these countries, and almost all of them, the population is under 25, half the population.
Absolutely.
That is a major factor, the youth of the protesters.
Of course, and why? Because those young people don't remember, for obvious reason, the colonial time. So they don't see anymore any legitimacy to the dictatorship, for the dictatorships built just after colonialism. The ruling party in Iraq, in Syria, in Algeria, and so on, are not for them the parties of the independence. They are simply, and they are right, the dictatorship.
Dictatorships, and that's how they see them, and they want to forge parties in their own image.
Exactly. And so those regimes in the Arab world lost their legitimacy completely. Completely.
That said, you acknowledge this is the first act of the revolution, the first act of the Arab Spring. You say there's still a long way to go, many more acts. We're seeing a lot of trouble in Syria, for instance, right now.
Sure, but just remember 89. 89 in France with the French Revolution, and 89 in Europe with the end of communism. It was only the first step. It was only the first year. Because where is democracy now in Russia? It doesn't exist. Where is now democracy in Romania, in Bulgaria?
Still in the process.
Still in the process. Exactly. Still in the process. And so this year, the last year, 2011, will be l'an 1 in French, the first year.
The first year, and like 89 was, and we have to wait.
Exactly.
But,
and it will last. It will last. But, at least 20, 25, maybe 30 years.
We're talking a long, drawn-out conflict. Are you worried, though, at, say, the rise of Islamist parties in a lot of these regions? Some people say that this does not, as we would say, bode well for the future. How do you feel about that? Is the Arab Spring ahead in jeopardy, or is this just a transition?
It's just a transition, and Islamism itself is in transition. Just remember, the ruling party now in Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, Mr. Gül, and the AKP, they are supposed to be Islamist.
They're moderate.
But they are also Democrats. And they do respect, democracy in Turkey. you can, and I do it, criticize them for many things, for a lot of things, but basically they respect constitution and democracy, and they are quite successful.
This is assuming, though, this is assuming the regions, the countries that have gone through the Arab Spring will all aspire to and achieve the Turkish model.
I think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I deeply think so, and why? Because the Islamists in Tunisia, in Egypt, and so on, what do they want? Very simple things. To be successful, popular, and re-elected. And in order to be successful and re-elected, they have to put economy in order, to keep the countries quiet and in order, and so to be a good government.
A good government. We're unfortunately out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. But you're making the point that perhaps power makes you more moderate. So they will have to somehow solve the problems, which will mean being
I
less.
do think so. I do think so because they have to compromise with economy, with a modern society, with a very diverse society, with Europe, with United States, and so on.
And
so
the
on.
demands of those young people who are driving the revolution.
Absolutely, and that's the main point.
Bernard Guetta, we're going to leave it on that optimistic note. The Arab revolutions, a long time in the making, and still a long way to go. We've been speaking to prize-winning French journalist and columnist Bernard Guetta, originally of Le Monde, today of France Inter Radio and also Libération newspaper. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you to you.
Thanks to all of you for watching.